Hello, and welcome to Qredible's live broadcast. We're joined today, as always, by our CEO and chairman, Brian Fitzpatrick. And this week, we're very excited to have Ryan Guzall with us. Ryan is a supply chain and human resources thought leader with a background in machine learning and biochemistry. He leads one of the largest staffing agencies and supply chain consultancies in the cannabis space. He is the assistant director of Spartan Innovation's Venture Fellows program and the director of business development for Michigan State University's Axia Institute. He's here with us today to discuss green genes technology. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Ryan. To get us started, could you tell us a little bit about your background and your professional journey?
Certainly, but first, a couple of corrections. So I'm not currently in those roles at Michigan State. Those are former roles. So I am only now currently the CEO of Green Genes and the staffing side of things and consulting and not cannabis. But my background, yes, is biochemistry. I started off on that front, studied for about half a decade. Due to just a comedy of errors, I ended up in human resources management, founded a company from my dorm room, which did a lot of staffing and hospitality. So decided I can get some grants and scholarships on that end, finished off in the human resource management side over at Michigan State, and then went straight into their #1 ranked supply chain program. Studied supply chain, got my MBA through those guys, ended up at the world's largest procurement consulting firm, did a lot of indirect procurement consulting, and then headed over to the Axia Institute, where I was essentially the face of the supply chain program, interacting with big pharma and big tech and trying to help them adhere to DSCSA compliance regulations and interacting with the FDA and all sorts of regulatory bodies on that front. And today, I'm in cannabis. So it's not a thing I ever thought I would be in. I think many people who are in it never thought they would be in it as well. Especially coming from a background of parents who owned a diagnostic laboratory. I worked in medical laboratories. I grew up in that environment. So, no use of any sort of substances in the house. And now here we are, and I think we share a bit of a similar impetus for doing the things that we're doing. Qredible is focusing on provenance, I believe, and verification for the safety of the consumer. We were going to launch a diagnostic laboratory in the state of Michigan. And I don't want to name names, but there's a laboratory up here who owns about 70 to 80% of the market, and it is a market known for THC inflation. So as ethical operators, we couldn't operate in this space. We pulled the plug 2 days before launch and decided maybe we can go do it over in New Jersey. Well, the same thing existed in New Jersey. We identified a common problem, which was THC inflation. How do we solve that? And the answer was to found Green Genes.
Well, that's a great story, and it's so funny because you're right. I mean, I never ever imagined myself being in the cannabis industry, just because of the way I was raised, and I've never personally was a cannabis user at all until recently, where I use it for wellness and medicinal purposes for sleep, but I'm not a smoker. But it's interesting, the wonderful people that I've met in the industry like yourself who have bring these wonderful experiences in technology and supply chain and safety, and it's great to see how the industry is changing. However, we still have a lot of issues like the lab shopping, like the THC shopping, and we'll talk a little bit later. I want to get your take on what's going on in the California testing standards and what's happening there. But before we do that, I really want to hear a little bit more about your work, and give our audience an idea of what green gene technology is and the primary problem that it's solving.
Sure. So Green Genes, our objective is to pair the right person with the right product at the right place, time, and price, utilizing human and plant genetics. So we're at the level now where we can use demographic information and basically terpene, flavonoid, cannabis profile information that comes from testing laboratories and historical data, product interactions with the individual. So if you're a person, you're on the platform, you have a product that you've used, you can chart how you felt when you engage with that product. That information is aggregated so that people who are like you, who share a similar profile to you, will be able to come in. And let's say you are a non-user, you're kind of curious, you can come to the app and see, well, the recommendations are going to be made based on positive outcomes that people like me genetically or demographically have experienced in the past. So that's our objective, is to close that last linkage between the supply chain and the consumer. So when I was in on the pharma side, this was a thing that they tried to do a variety of different ways. Basically medication adherence, which is a bit of a different problem. But this one allows the linkage between the consumer and the manufacturer, the brand, the distributor, everybody along the supply and value chain, so that they can see that this person is having a good experience. Why are they having a good experience? And how can we give them something that they will use and will protect our brand equity as well? Because, there are negative outcomes that come from using cannabis for people if they ingest the wrong type with the wrong terpene profile. And then they go, that's it. It's akin to alcohol. Everybody basically has had a shot of something they don't like, and there are chemical components that dictate that is true, like limonene and linalool, for example. There are allergies for people who are in the United Kingdom to those things. So if you look at the origin of those come from India. So, people who would be of Indian descent, they don't have allergies generally to limonene, citrus fruits. You go over to UK, you go, well, those aren't indigenous to that area. So you would expect that a person that is grown up in that area that has that genetic profile is going to have a negative outcome with those types of elements. And our objective is to prove or disprove that to be true.
Well, it's really interesting. And last week, for our audience that's tuned in, we had Len May on from Endicana Health, and he was talking about sort of the DNA profile. So he's got this really cool technology that really identifies what is in a consumer's DNA and what they should be looking for in a product. So that's sort of the first step. You're the second step. The second step is, okay, now, how does that match up? But it only matches up if you understand the terpene profile and even some of the minor cannabinoids. And here's the curious thing. When you talk to anybody in this industry, it's always about THC, how much THC is in it, and, whether it's sativa or indica. And it's like, there's so much more to this herb. So, what I'm curious is, that's sort of like the purists that are always talking about that, but the consumer's changing. And what have you seen from that perspective as sort of the barriers that are sort of stopping green gene technology from really reaching more people and getting this message out?
Well, I would say there are two elements to that question. The first one being the general market, and the second one being the breadth of our reach. So the first one that I witness is in mature markets like California or Michigan, let's say, you have a more refined customer palette. They've already been through THC inflation. They know that certain products are or are not what they say they are. And really, if you keep on ingesting a product of a certain level, whatever it is, you're going to hit a certain level of THC in your body no matter what. So they now are focusing on what is the best outcome for me and why do these strains make me feel different? And the reason is the flavonoid and terpene profile. So when I visit, and we launched in New York, that was the first state we launched in with Green Genes. When I was out there, that is a relatively new market. And being in a store that, they had a serious problem with licensure. There were only 24 stores open at the time for the entire state, which was sitting about a year and a half worth of inventory. So when I witnessed, let's say, bud tenders advising, it was, these are my favorite strains, and this one's indica and this one's sativa. So which one do you like, indica or sativa? Here's where it is. And then out of these, here are my top three. Well, the serious problem with that is when you have, let's say, an Irish guy. So there was an Irish guy who was doing this, and he's advising, Black people, Native American people, Asian people, Indians coming into the store. They don't have the same genetic composition. They are not allergic to the same things that he would be. So when he's recommending certain things, it's not that he's doing it maliciously. They are genuinely the things that he likes. But these are not going to be the same things that have the same positive outcome for these different demographics. So that's what I witness in these mature and immature markets. That's the major difference. The objective is to take away the component of education from the consumer. It shouldn't be on the consumer to read a whole bunch of literature and become well educated on the ins and outs of the products and what flavonoids and terpenes and hydrocarbons are and how they interact with you genetically. I need to know what's going to make me feel good. I'm going into the store for a specific reason. Let me push a button on a platform and give me a recommendation that isn't going to cause me to have an adverse outcome. That's our objective. So we want to simplify that process, remove the expensive and inefficient education component of it so that people can interact with the product the manufacturers make for a specific reason, which is to produce a positive outcome for the end user. On the green gene side of things, we have been flying under the radar for a year, and we've been doing that on purpose so that we can bring this to market slowly and build a back end. So our back end is built by a bioinformaticist at Stanford, a friend of mine that I helped manage over at Spartan Innovations. So great guy. We have a back end that's inimitable. So at this point, we have a product that we know we can launch to market that gathers the information. And like you were saying previously, yes, there are companies that focus on the DNA, but these are, and that's great. We do that as well. You can upload DNA. You can provide us your profile. The current selections are based on 23andMe and Ancestry.com profiles. So if you already know those, you can select your boxes and move right on. But those other models are historical models. Those are based on research that has been done, which is limited. And generally, it's for dermatological side of things. So there are, terpene interaction studies, skin level dermatological studies that have been done that you can extrapolate this information from and make references and recommendations based upon. But we have the living model. So when you come to us, you are continuously putting new information in that is going to result in a more refined outcome. The biggest problem that I see, and I've reviewed about 100 of these different studies, is the sample size. It's always extremely small. So it's hard to get people, especially if they are focused on cannabinoids. The research money isn't there, and it's relatively new that it is there. And even those institutions are being hit by the federal government saying you're going to lose your funding now. So it's a very tricky situation. So that information is great as a base to start, but you need a broader spectrum, more people, so that you can get a more refined recommendation engine that is going to tell you this is good for you or this is bad for you and why.
How far do you think we are from empirical significance on this data? I mean, do you think we're far off? We're years off, months off? How do we get there?
It depends on traction. There are certain clients of ours who are medical only, and they are focused on, we have a meeting upcoming with the FDA, by the way, related to this aspect of our platform so monitoring for adverse outcomes. And this is common in the pharmaceuticals industry and an objective for any supplier of medical goods in any market. So they're one specific grower that we engage with grows one strain and only one strain. And it is a static terpene profile. So this is the ideal for us. We have a control that we can monitor. You place this in the market, and then against that control, you can see how people of all different backgrounds engage with the product and whether or not they have positive and negative outcomes. Now, we can do it with any type of product. We have the ability to upload your COA with us, so we can pull all your terpene information. Hopefully, if you've had it tested for those, we can pull that into the system, and then it takes a lot of data in order to train the model. But over time, you can easily get this done in a year. So it depends on traction. If you have the appropriate amount of traction from the right amount of people across the United States, by the way, because I'm sure, as you know, the names of these strains are arbitrary. The genetics is what matters. So we're monitoring the genetics through the reports that have been made by these laboratories. And back to you, Qredible, the importance is ensuring that the data that we're getting is valid and that we can rely upon it. And I think one other thing maybe we should talk about, and I can send it off to you, is the artificial terpenation of things. So I don't know if you went to MJ BizCon this year, but when I was there, there was a lot of sale of artificial terpenes. So yes, lab grown and then also natural. And they were saying, so disturbingly, I had a report from one of the companies that, we only sell it at the point of sale to the consumer. Well, if the consumer doesn't know and you're selling them a high level of whatever it is, and they have a negative outcome with that, they can die. They can go in anaphylactic shock and die from that. So this is not something you want to do. But in further conversation, I said, well, let's say I'm a grower and I want to just, buy this and put it on my stuff after testing and send it on to the next level so that my, product performance is really good. Well, yeah, you could do that too. That's not the right answer. So no, you should never be able to do this. And it is important to ensure that testing standards are in place, which generally they are not, and that a company like Qredible can ensure that the test results are real.
Yes, that's exactly right, and that's all important if you are concerned about consumer safety, which we need to be in this industry, absolutely. And, the frequency of labs actually doing full, analysis on the correct things is really, it's not there, and it depends on lots of different factors, the legal requirements, market demand, individual business practices, meaning it's all over the place as far as what people are testing for. Your technology is going to rely on a full profile, cannabinoid, terpene, flavonoids, all of these things in order to get the benefit of it. So, with no testing standards across the country in any one given state, how do we make this work? That seems like a barrier.
Yes, it is. And I'm glad you brought this up because that laboratory that we were referencing earlier made a comment about a reference lab that is about to be installed in Michigan that they can't be trusted, which is ironic. They can, and this is the standard for medical laboratories in any area of the world. So that is step one, is ensuring that you have a reference laboratory in the area in which you operate. Somebody has to be trustworthy and somebody has to verify these results. So that is step one. Step two is ensuring the provenance of the results, as you're saying. So as your technology, that's the problem that you guys would, in my purview, most successfully solve. So you have laboratory information management systems that sit at the middle of communicating the data that comes out of the laboratory, going to the manufacturer, and then down the supply chain. So I think that is probably the most valuable interaction that you could have as Qredible, is to validate the results that are coming out of these LIMS providers. But then you go one step back up the supply chain and you come back to the laboratory. You have to ensure that these labs are actually producing reliable results. And we went through the entire process of starting a laboratory in the state of Michigan. We are people who've been in labs our whole lives, a team of about 7 people, PhDs, analytical chemists, and the lack of standards was shocking. We sat with the board in Michigan. So it was the MRA at the time. We had basically almost the entire board on a call with us. And our questions were relatively basic. So, what's the standard for this? And the response is, well, whatever you want. I appreciate you trust us as experts, in the area, but no, you have to have an actual standard. So the industry is now, I think, progressed far beyond that. There are reliable standards in writing in the state of Michigan, which is where I live and operate mostly. But I monitor, other markets as well. And, one major market that I'm shocked by is Canada, that they don't really have testing standards or standards in general. And they predate us with legalization. So that's a bit of a shocker. And I think a great market also for Qredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's two things that when we talk about testing is we talk about what they're testing for and how they're testing for. And we got a question here that's interesting. I want to address because it just popped up. But when we're talking about lab standards, the new California lab standards, only 18 of California's 38 licensed testing labs are actually compliant. So that's interesting as they came up with that. So it sort of is a testimony to that. Question from our LinkedIn crowd: with the issues labs are having, can Ryan talk more about the validation of terpene profiles? So how are those terpene profiles validated, which I guess gets a little bit more to the method and science behind it?
Methodology is standardized generally when it comes to terpene profiling, but it's the reliability of the result that I think is the center of that question. The terpene testing, first of all, if you're going to place an additive in the product, the additive has to be added before it's tested. So there is not really standardization of what is considered final product in a variety of markets. New York specifically was interesting to me because in the beginning they were allowing manufacturers to sample their own product. So, you can't do this. You have to have somebody out in the field from a laboratory who has a standard process and, random number generator. So where do you pull from this sample, and how do you pull from this sample, and how much do you need of this sample? Those standards weren't there, and the market was open, and they were allowing manufacturers to pull their own stuff, which, You're going to say, I'm going to pull my best product and stick it over here so it can be ground up and the terpenes and flavonoids and cannabinoids be tested. And also so I can avoid, a positive aspergillus and get this to market as fast as I can. So that's the unethical, irresponsible way to do things. That's evolved since then. So they've implemented new standards. But back to the terpene profile, the issue is the reliability of the test and when you sample in that process. So if the product is in a bag and it is sealed and it is ready to be shipped out to the final end user, that is when the product should be sampled for terpenes. So that is my recommendation on that. We both are a part of ASTM, so I'm glad to be in the room talking about international standards when it comes to cannabinoid testing. This is relatively new, so I think maybe the person who asked that question might be in a market in which this isn't prevalent yet. But in markets like Michigan, it is now a competitive advantage to have terpene profile. I will mention, name drop one outfit out in New York, which is Ravensview Genetics, and Joanne Kedrovitz and Michael out there. So they focus on landrace genetics. They have been doing terpene profiling since the beginning, and they have a little QR code on the side of their product, which allows you to pull up their COAs and information about their products. So setting a standard like that is important. Following the leader, I would say is an important thing to do for the rest of people in the industry to set those standards properly. But it is at the state level as to whether or not they want to mandate terpene testing. It is not mandated in Michigan, but it is seen as a competitive advantage. So when it comes to the actual chemistry of doing it in the laboratory, I don't have the recommendation. I would say follow the standard that is out there. There are a variety of different outfits that will give you those standards. But when it comes to reliability, again, it is upon the integrity of the testing laboratory and having a reference laboratory in place to ensure that those results are real.
It's funny. I've told this story before. One of our national account representatives was talking to a lab, and the question that he had for the lab was, "What is your uniqueness? What is your unique competitive differentiator?" And they said that, well, we can help cannabis brands get to the answer they want.
That's not what you want to hear.
I said, and he was confused. He says, well, what do you mean? He says, well, we're obviously, if they're looking for certain numbers on THC values, we can help with that. So when you were talking earlier about, so just so our listeners understand, at the actual testing labs, they use chromatography equipment, right? The actual, and some are better than others as far as how they operate, the things they test for, and also how well calibrated they are. And those results actually come out into the LMS, the lab management system that Ryan was speaking of earlier. And they basically create the COA that we end up seeing. So there's lots of room for things to be changed between that chromatography equipment, even getting to the LMS system, right? Numbers can be magically modified. And then when they're produced in a PDF, they could be magically modified again. So there is an integrity issue. So what Ryan's talking about is actually very, very significant. But to get to this point about where you were talking about a brand up in New York, I think it was, that's sort of pioneering. I mean, I think they're pioneers by doing this and having that cannabinoid profile. And then you also mentioned Canada, right? So, even Canada, where there's federal legalization, there's a big opportunity it's the testing of how and what that's important. So what is being tested for, how it's being tested for. And when you look at that, with the regulations, even in Canada, everything is sort of genericized. So with the changing preferences of the new adult cannabis consumer, which in Canada, in the US, I'm seeing this as really an important thing to the future, because in Canada, for example, where there's really not a lot of brand recognition, because they're all the distributors in the provinces essentially are the ones that are selling to the retailers, and the labeling requirements, they have to put so much on the labels that these brands can't really get information out about it. So I think there's a big opportunity in Canada for these terpene profiles and educating the consumer beyond THC values, right? Beyond the strain, and getting them into these things are important. So how do you see this happening? How do you see this migrating, and how do you envision the future of the industry with Green Genes technology, with this kind of changing consumer?
Well, that is a part of it. And I think, working together would probably be advantageous for both of us, because we have partners who are willing to in place QR codes on their products that we can scan at, near point of sale. So the objective for us, I mean, I'm a supply chain idealist, I would say, so if you envision it, maybe you can do it kind of like the Elon Musk model. So I see a future in which, augmented reality is utilized, and you can walk into a dispensary and take a look at the shelf, and it'll red or green flag the products that are good or bad for you. You pick it, you go to the counter, you check out, and that's the end of that. So I think if you look at the pharmaceuticals industry, they have the same type of problem in provenance and proving that the product is what it says it is. I remember a company named Pedigree that dealt with contraceptives in Africa. So I think about 60% of contraceptives in Africa are fake. So they're intercepted, they're interdicted, and then they're replaced. So, diverted, and then they are sold basically, chiclets, and, the outcome from that. So that's not good. This is something that we need to ensure doesn't happen in the markets that we participate in. And you see a lot of this, cross-border sales. I mean, it's a felony, but you still see it a lot. There was, when the New York market first opened up and they were sitting on such a glut of inventory, they started shipping it all over the United States. And this was known because we received bags labeled New York in Michigan. So, ensuring that the product is coming from the market, which should be a protected market, is very important for the operators in those markets. So, there are a lot of regulatory fees that you have to pay. You have to adhere to very strict guidelines when it comes to becoming a manufacturer, processor, distributor, or wholesaler, or whatever you want to term it in whatever market you're in, or a retailer. And then to be damaged by, for example, in Michigan, you have a lot of sales that go over the Ohio border. So if you're coming and going across those state lines, it may be advantageous to those producing in Michigan right now to be able to sell to Ohio, but they just legalized. So now I think about 40% of the sales from the southeastern side of Michigan go over that border. And we need to ensure that the product is staying where it's been tested, and that it is what people are saying it is, because there have also been many cases in which product has been repackaged in, white labeled, not technically white labeled, but illegally white labeled containers, and then sold at facilities that are legally licensed. So you have a lot of issues that I think Qredible can successfully solve, and that Green Genes is working to remedy as well.
Well, that's perfect. I think the combination is powerful. And one of the things that we are working diligently on with another organization as well is coming up with the consumer education portal, where this is going to be a key aspect of it, because we need to educate consumers. They need to be able to go somewhere and find out about the brand they're using, the product they're using, and understand all of these things. So I'm so tired of the word marketplace, because there's a lot of marketplaces out there that, and I've called them online weed garage sales before, because you never know what you're going to get. And it's no knock on any of the companies out there, but there needs to be a different approach, and you'll be hearing more from Qredible on that. So, Ryan, how can people get in touch with you and learn more about Green Genes technology?
Well, you can go to greengines.ai. That'll refer you to a couple of different platforms on there. If you are a B2B side, you can sign up today. It's free. The only cost is the transactional cost for us to place the ads basically for your product, so that people know that surveys are available. So if you're a user, you can come out there and take a survey for a product, scan it at a point of sale, and get it for a little bit less. We incentivize the users to use the platform in that way. If you are a user, you can do the same method, greengines.ai, follow it through and join on and set your profile. And as soon as products are available for review in your market, you'll see them in the Explore tab. And we also are launching today a My Strains version, which is in the central tab, which will allow you to put your own products in there and review as you see fit.
Awesome. It's been a great time with you, Ryan. Look forward to working with you more in the future and getting to the future cannabis user and really bringing this marketplace, this industry, I should say, to where it really needs to be. So thanks so much for joining us today, and we'll be talking soon.
Thanks.